Hello, everybody. I'm Raul Fernandez, Select Board Member and Chair of the Task Force to Reimagine Policing in Brookline. This is our meeting for Friday, February 12th, 2021. We are at that point in our work where we are ready next week, in fact, to have a public hearing. We've had 5 subcommittee public hearings in the last 2 weeks, and we are right now prepping for our big February 17th, 7 p.m. Public hearing for the full task force, which is in its own way a preparation for a March 2nd presentation before the select board. So we'll be talking a lot about that today. Other things we need to do: approve some meeting minutes. We're going to see if there, we presented last week this Brookline Forward social service agency proposal to see if you have any other thoughts or edits on that, and subcommittee updates as well. Before we begin, any comments, remarks, or anything to share from members of the task force or staff? Hearing none, we will go into our first order of business, which are the meeting minutes. The question of approving the meeting minutes from Friday, February 5th, 2021. Any edits or comments about those minutes? Well done as always. Let's go forth with approval then. All those in favor, I'm going to work my way down the line. And again, these are the meeting minutes from Friday, February 5th, 2021. Malcolm.
Yes.
Alexander?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Almas?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Eitan?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
And it's a yes for me too. Great. What I'd like to do now is sort of take the public hearing preparation out of order. I'd like to do that after the subcommittee updates. So what I'd like to do is first have this conversation, a continued conversation around the Brookline Forward proposal to see if there are any, again, edits, updates, thoughts you'd like to share about that. And then during our subcommittee time, to see if there are any, if you could walk us through perhaps any substantive changes that have been made since, well, we talked last week. So if there's, in some cases, there might not be much since we talked last week. In other cases, you might have made some substantive changes. So first on Brookline Forward, we presented that last week. And essentially for anyone that's joining us the first time, this proposes, one of the things that we talked about was through our work, what we found is that the police department has been engaging in social service work, and primarily the reason they've been doing that is because they were filling a vacuum, they were filling a void where there was not enough attention, not enough funding, not enough resources to address what are some pretty significant issues relative to particularly youth and families, but others in our community as well. All of the work that we saw throughout our subcommittees really led us to a place where, if we think, and we do, that social services are or should be an important aspect of what we do as a community and particularly as a government, then we should put our resources directly in that way. That even at their best, what police are doing are addressing the symptoms of inequity. And that we think, in addition to providing staff that are better trained to even address those symptoms, that we also can do better by starting to address the root causes of those inequities. And so in comes this proposal for this social service agency, tentatively titled Brookline Forward. It's just a placeholder name; it can be called something later on. This agency would bring together existing offices, including the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, the Council on Aging, and the Office of Veteran Services, but also build out, new offices for Youth and Family Services and Immigrant and Refugee Services. And I'll add one edit that Mike Sandman added during our conversation last week, which would be a focus on economic equity. As one of those sort of new offices or new staff to focus on economic equity. And then it would also provide staff support for the Domestic Violence Roundtable, the Commission for Women, Brookline Commission on Disability, and also a new council that's contemplated here on LGBTQIA+ inclusion. The department, the agency, would partner with other town departments as necessary to meet community needs, things like working with Health and Human Services to develop a mental health incident response team, something our vulnerable people and people in crisis subcommittee's been working on. Working with the building and fire departments to ensure residents are living in safe housing, and with the police department on diversion efforts for youth. The department will be funded by municipal dollars. I know Mel and team are going to be working on sort of pricing out exactly what a department of this scope and scale might typically cost. We're not going to have that in time for next week's public hearing, I'm told. As some of you know, this is budget season, and actually there's a budget presentation happening next week to the select board. And there's a ton of work going into that. So we expect to have that though in time for the March 2nd meeting in front of the select board. So just want to make sure you all have that update. Okay, and then we talk a little bit about personnel and stuff like that, having a commissioner to head this new agency, as well as additional staff to fill out those offices that we talked about. So I want to know, we had a sort of preliminary conversation about this. We got a lot of feedback from members of the task force last week. Wanted to know if there's any additional feedback at this point.
I just say two things. First of all, let me preface this by saying I don't know personally enough about how the town operates to really weigh in. That's why I didn't weigh in last week. But two things that just come to mind. I keep coming back to this tension that we seem to have where some of the social services that the police department provides seem to be because they were asked to. That seems quite inconsistent with the view that social service roles should not be taken away from the police department. I don't. It seems to me that we've gotten feedback in both directions, and I just think that we should try to articulate that. Like, either the police department is doing the social service work because they were asked to, and therefore we can find another way to do it, but then it's unclear to me why there's any opposition to then taking away those roles. And this is sort of as a preface for why, for moving in this direction. The second thing is, Raul, just like from a kind of an outsider, one of the things that I'm struggling with is like, and this seems very basic, but like maybe a clear articulation of why the nonprofit charitable sector is not sufficient and requires this kind of investment from the town.
Okay. That's something you'd like to see in the presentation?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it seems like obviously, like historically, a lot of these social services provided outside of government. Then it seems like historically police are involved because there really are gaps that that no one's filling. And now the trajectory is to try to recalibrate that. But I just think that there'll probably be people, including myself, not that familiar with the government structure of the town, who are kind of like, well, why does the town have to do this? And so I think that, I don't say that in a critical way. I just think that it maybe is worth having some justifications, like the nonprofit sector is not providing these services.
And one of the things I can do is, because I can certainly speak to that, but the folks that I think can much better speak to that are some of the folks, at Steps to Success and the Brookline Teen Center, and even the Brookline Foundation and the Brookline Center and the BHA and others. And so they're all going to be invited to our public hearing on the 17th, and they'll all be re-invited by me to the select board meeting. I think March 2nd is just a presentation to the select board, but there's a public hearing that'll happen later in the month they'll certainly be invited to speak then too. And I think even better than I can, they'll probably be able to articulate those things. So we'll make sure we do that. Kristen?
Yeah, again, I'm appreciative of your bringing this back up for discussion. And I think maybe building a little bit on the heels of what I hear from Eitan. The feedback that we've been hearing regularly in a number of the Go Small conversations has included a very clear statement about fear. And if we are going to, I would posit that part of what we're talking about, at least for this thread, is how can I give feedback about the Brookline Police Department performing those social services needs, this role that we've asked them to take on. And then there's this aspect of fear in trying to calibrate the delivery of those services to citizens in Brookline. And so my concern then is that if this is a way for us to either circumvent or undercut those feelings of fear that people may have in trying to get effective social services provided to them, that we don't just shift the fear. Part of what we heard, I think, in the walk and talk discussion was that there's a web of policies together. People felt fearful of ultimately housing insecurity. And so when we got together to talk about walk and talk, the conversation quickly shifted to, I feel like if I say something or if I seek services, that this is going to put my housing status in jeopardy. So I wouldn't want us to do something that just shifts the fear, thinking that we've actually done right by our proposal and what the community wants and needs, if we don't actually think about the fear that exists and whether or not this is a credible way of either eliminating it or addressing it.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Malcolm?
Thank you. I think what Kristen is saying is really important for us to think about, people's fear of what government has done in the past. Like, it's not just policing. And we talked about this earlier, like us having a very short window to build trust, to have people tell us things, right? And so what does it mean when we create a government agency that does that? I also want to go back to Eitan's point, because I think about my debate training and like trying to anticipate what the other argument is. And I feel like that is what Eitan's bringing up is actually an age-old argument, right? I mean, this is Carnegie talking about like the responsibility of industrialists to provide, security for their communities, like that, and especially in a town like Brookline. Like, it's too visceral for me, because literally I was just teaching, maybe I don't know this, Booker T. Washington came to Brookline High in 1894. And when Booker T. Washington visits wealthy liberal communities, he's here to get their pockets to keep Black people in the South, so they can go to those Southern HBCUs and stay there. And so, especially in a wealthy town like Brookline, I feel like we're going to get a lot of pushback saying, well, like, can't somebody just donate some money, or like, can we create an organization? And Raul, what you're saying is very real, because I work with both the Teen Center and Steps to Success, where, they're beacons that we shine to the rest of the world and say, look how well we do, look at this. And they're literally scraping for pennies. And so I just think, we have to, the hardest thing for us, and I know I'm not even speaking clearly, is how do we clearly project all of that and then say, I think this is an opportunity for our government, for our institutions, to build trust in more of our citizenry. And think about how we're going to convey that, because I think all of these things are very real. I think what Eitan says is definitely coming at, if not us directly, probably the select board. It may be more directly to like Salmon and advisory board, because they're the ones who will piecemeal budget stuff in a lot of ways. So, but I think I agree, like, that's coming. Like, there's going to be some people, why are we raising more taxes, or why are you using my tax dollars, when, like, and they'll even point to Steps in the Teen Center and say, see, we don't need to do it, even though we all know they're scraping for pennies. And so I just feel like we have to anticipate that, as well as what Kristen is saying about that real fear, and figure out how we live on sort of both sides of that righteousness.
Thanks, man. Alexander?
I want to echo everything Kristen and Malcolm said, and also add, I think there's a particular benefit to a coordinated response, right? Like one of the, I think, strong, like as Malcolm rightly points out, this is very much an age-old argument. We can look to history here, and one of the things I think that's been really beneficial historically in these arguments happening across the nation is that whenever you have a network of private organizations, there's nobody whose job it is to coordinate those services, right? And so they can each decide individually how much they want to take on in particular aspects of a wide range of social and economic, et cetera, problems. And they're scraping for pennies. There's only so much anybody can do. And these are organizations that are designed to fill gaps. But in order to survive, you pick a certain gap and you roll with it. There's a dozen that aren't being covered, and there's only so many meetings you can have to talk with one another. So I think that coordinated response is really important. And that's one of the things that a government agency can do. And also just to sort of pitch in on I think there's an argument to be had here about the proper role of government, right? And to me, I think it's really important to recognize that at the end of the day, like, especially like as somebody who was very much raised in a conservative family with all these ideas about like, oh, government is basically for mutual self-defense and that's about it. All a government actually is a bunch of people in a society making mutual agreements about how we want to live. That's it, right? And if it weren't done through government, it would be done through some other like community organization that we wouldn't call a government. That's all this is, right? It happens in small groups, happens in big groups. When it gets to groups this large, structures get into place. And so we as a society need to ask ourselves, how do we want to address the problems that we face? Do we want to leave it entirely out of our own hands, like the people who we've put in charge of solving community problems? And I don't think that we do. I think we want to tackle this head on.
Thanks, Alexander. Bonnie?
I unraised my hands because Alexander just made my point precisely.
All right. Other thoughts here? Hey, Dan, I feel like we haven't heard from you in a couple weeks. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about this direction.
I haven't concentrated a lot, but I did think about the question that got thrown out earlier, is how the police department got to start doing a lot of these things. Well, if you look back in our history, at least I can talk about my career, we've always dealt with people that are struggling with substance abuse, with mental illness, but we also had places to take them to. And I can speak specifically to one that was on Fenwood Road, which is now one of the buildings that's owned by Brigham and Women. But there was a large mental health facility there that was just over our line, and we could take people that needed to get help and drop them off there. Probably 15 years ago, it closed. We didn't really have a lot of places to drop people off to get them the help that they needed. That wasn't a private facility, or things like that. So our job, and we've always taken our job very seriously, we got a lot of these types of calls falling our way. And you and I had this conversation that we saw that no one was filling the gap. Nobody was responding to crises. We were always responding to crises. We were trying to calm them down, but we were also trying to get them to get some follow-up care. We took it on as a responsibility to do that service and perform the service in best that we can. We could. And that meant devoting people to it. That means providing training for our officers. That meant stepping it up, because whether we liked it or not, we were going to deal with calls like that. We were going to deal with people that were struggling. And it was only fair that we performed that function as best we could. So we were asked by some levels of the community, or not levels, I would say places in the community, to come in and talk to their residents. We were asked to provide a little bit more service in certain areas. But the big thing was the role of the police as a social service agency. Law enforcement is very small. Law enforcement is not a big, 98% of the work that the police do. They do a lot of other services for the community. And this was one of them. And this was one of them that we saw that could either go very wrong, or we could do our best to make it go what's best for everybody, and everybody goes home safely. And that's really why it all began in earnest the way it now functions today.
Right.
So I think that has to be put out there. I think I was fortunate as the police chief to have some real quality people that wanted to take off with this. And I don't know if you know the story, I've said it many times, but I just at one day asked Lieutenant Sergeant Pastor and Sergeant Chris Malin how we could do things better. And they had a plan about more training, do the CIT ourselves, and things like that, all mapped out. They just wanted a time that they could spend with me on it. And the easiest decision I made was to say yes, and they ran with it. So it's people like them in the department that really want to do the right thing. And that's what got us here.
Yeah, certainly it's my hope that moving forward, let's say we as a community move in this direction and establish an agency like this, and in effect put them on the front lines of engaging with youth and families, in schools and public housing and elsewhere, that the police department would continue to have a similar sort of orientation toward, now instead of directly leading efforts in this space, partnering on the things like diversion efforts, supporting people when they're in need, making sure that domestic violence victims are protected, and things like that. And so, I certainly don't contemplate the police department disappearing and only being, only being in cars, patrolling the streets, and eventually getting out of those cars, but being a partner in this. What do you think about that, Dan?
Well, I think you see a lot of communities, especially the larger ones, going to teams, because teams to go out to take care of these people that are in crisis, because there's a lot of unknown on the calls, and one way or the other, if something goes bad, it's going to fall to the police. So I cannot see the police getting taken away, all these functions getting taken away from the police. I don't think that that's good for the community, because situations are different and they can go in a bad way pretty quickly, especially when you're dealing with people that abuse substances, or people that have mental illness that they really can't control their actions. I can see a team effort. And I think that if you take a look at what a lot of the other communities are doing, they're doing team efforts, meaning a police and a social worker working together, it doesn't have to be the police walking in there taking over, but the police officer can be there to make sure that things don't go south.
And I know we're very interested in the a cahoots-like model, something that would be adapted to work best here in Brookline. That again doesn't at all eliminate police from the equation, but sort of makes a sort of distinction between calls where the likelihood for any kind of violence is extremely low, which is most calls, and then other calls that where there might be something different going on. I'm thinking more about some of the other sort of social service sort of activities that the departments sort of engaged in more, but I hear you in what you're saying here. Yeah. Okay. And with that, do you want to get in on this?
I just want to say that what the chief is saying about partnering in crisis calls, the evidence really does not back that up. The evidence shows that people in crisis are, the outcomes are far better if police are not involved as primary part of the primary crisis intervention team, and that it's only in very rare occasions that police need to be called in. So I just, from an evidence-based perspective, having a police officer partner with a social worker in crisis intervention calls is not found to be helpful. In fact, it can lead to worse outcomes for the person in crisis.
All right. Anything else to add on this particular proposal? I gather from the comments that we've heard today that there's a need to sort of lay out the case in our presentations as well as in the report. Some of that case will be laid out or is already laid out in your subcommittee reports, which we'll talk about in just a second. But really effectively articulating the need for this, and as I said, I think some of the folks that are closest to this work right now are going to be most effective in articulating the need for this, and I know I've spoken with a lot of those folks already. All right, we'll talk about that. Anything else anyone wants to add here? All right, let us then see if any of the subcommittees have anything new to add or anything they wanted to make us aware of. I don't imagine we'll take a ton of time on this, but let's see. Aton, departmental analysis, we've kind of put it to bed, haven't we?
We have, it's done. I did want to point out there's a brand new article in Science magazine by my co-author and friend Jonathan Mamolo at Princeton and his colleagues, with a remarkable evidence that African American and women police officers are really essential to de-escalation. In other words, the evidence suggests that I won't get into the data analysis, but basically, when placed in similar situations, there is substantially less confrontation with the public, physical confrontation among African American and women police officers compared to white male police officers. And so this is sort of big news in our field right now. I mean, it just came out, and I only bring this up, not that it's particularly related to our report, but it is related to potential recommendations for the department. So I wanted to just kind of raise it. It's a little bit last minute. We've basically completed our report, but I just wanted to bring that to the task force's attention.
Yeah, you can send that. That'd be great.
Can I just say, I
Yes.
was taking a look at I was reading an abstract of that article before this meeting this morning. But I think I have to get into the details of it, but I think there's also something in there that patterns of bias still exist even when if you have a more diverse officer corps, that there's still a pattern of bias about in their interactions with white and people of color who are being the recipients of policing, that there's still patterns of bias that I think we need to pay attention to. So there's still some structural issues that are baked in there, even if we change who is doing the policing.
Looks like if you go to Science Magazine, just the main website, it's right on the front page. So you should be able to find it pretty easy if you're looking for it. I will read that. Okay. And in her absence, thanks again to Chi-Chi for her tremendous work on really putting together and continuously updating this report every time we needed to, which was many times. So thanks to her for that. School resource officers subcommittee.
So we did make a substantial change. We are now adding in the formal recommendation that school resource officers not be in schools, and that is our first and primary recommendation. Previously, we had said it, hey, listen, if you want school resource officers to stay in schools, here's the public process that needs to be done. That is all still there, but it is very much secondary now to our point. Get them out of there. And to the extent to which you want to keep them there, they should be out now and only brought back in if at the end of a long public process, that is what you're determined to do. And we strengthen our language there to make it clear that we're not saying, okay, dismiss our main recommendation and move immediately to the public process. This is what we believe after months of careful consideration and talking to a lot of people, and really bringing in the history. And one thing I do want to caution folks on, if they're just listening to this now, is our history section of our report is really powerful. It's long. If you kind of skip to the recommendation section, you are going to miss a lot and the basis for our thinking.
If I could add,
Good.
I think too, what we found is there's a real disconnect between a couple of things. What is actually defined as a school resource officer, who is doing that work, as well as then what that means in terms of police and school relations. And so, part of the history talks about police and school relations being very old in town and not necessarily eliminating potential liaisons and other things that have been around for a long time, but what the school resource officer actually means, as well as separating that from perhaps liking that school resource officer. You know what I mean? Like liking that person, makes an emotional thing, as opposed to, are we actually asking a school resource officer to do what is defined by the Memorandum of Understanding and law? And so, our feeling was that is not happening. That the things that, are prescribed by that Memorandum of Understanding, as well as prescribed by law as an SRO, is not happening. It's definitely not happening in the middle schools. And even at the high school. And so, I think it's important to separate those three elements. That most people at Brookline High School like Officer Keneally. They really do. But is she actually doing what is prescribed by an SRO, by law and other things? And, and if you separate those things, I just kept coming to a resolution that we don't need an SRO for that. And we don't really have one anyway. And so I think it's really important to kind of understand on those three levels, what all we're asking. And I think we made a real conscious effort to separate all those, as well as, I think what I was saying, have stronger language. We don't believe there's a need for a school resource officer in Brookline. Again, that's not to eliminate the relationship that's already there, but it's to say we don't believe there's a need for that.
Any questions here? All right. We will, as always, encourage people, as Alexander said, to read the whole thing, not just skip to the recommendations, but to understand those in context means reading the entire report. We'll make sure that we reflect that context in our presentation. Okay, next, and I have lost my place. Here we go. Is walk and talk subcommittee.
We do not have much to report. We discussed an article that came out about our hearing and confirmed all of the things that we needed to organize to get the report together, basically. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add about that? We didn't change anything.
We didn't change anything, I don't think, of note. We added some public comments that we've received, and we added the kind of annotated transcript of the public hearing, but nothing substantially or even slightly changed as a result of the public comments in terms of our report.
Okay. Great. There's a patch article that came out this week, and it was thankfully updated later on. The initial version of the patch article did not have the benefit of speaking to anybody on the task force, and I think the author who'd done other good work, good reporting, I think fair reporting on our work in the past, I think. Just didn't go the extra step on this one, but thankfully, we were able to have some conversations and provide some context for the work. And I think what you see is a more fair representation. I still think incomplete, but a more fair representation of the work on the walk and talk issue. And a lot of the issues that were raised earlier, and I talked directly with her. To really get her to understand this issue about the fear and mistrust that's there, and the tremendous efforts that various subcommittees have gone to get to reach in and get public input. Some of it that occurs in public hearings, but frankly much more that we're able to get by having individual conversations and things outside of the public eye, because frankly, there are many people who, as has been expressed in these meetings before, just do not want to appear on camera and be recorded and beamed into people's homes, telling their stories of hurt, not to mention the fear of retribution that some people feel in our community as a result of that, which I can understand. So in any case, we'll continue, I think, to tell that story. It's told in your subcommittee report, certainly, and I think we'll continue to tell that story as a full task force. Okay. Anything else here? All right. Thanks for your tremendous work on this, really. Community engagement and visioning.
Yeah, no substantive changes since our public hearing and our last opportunity to talk together. Did a little bit of reordering of the content in the report, just to, I think, make especially the points around the youth-centered vision sharper. Since the draft report was shared that got us to the public hearing, we've had the opportunity to just add in more of the substance from the Going Small conversations. Prior to the draft report, we only had the opportunity to excerpt some of the things that were coming out of those. Now we've had the opportunity to round them out more fully so that people can see in more depth what the terrain that we covered in the conversations. In particular, there's one conversation with a Black woman resident from BHA in VHA housing that I think is a particularly compelling read. So being able to include that in our materials has been particularly important.
Okay, great. Looking forward to reading that. All right. Anything else here? Any questions? Okay. And vulnerable people and people in crisis subcommittee.
We made some minor changes based on the public feedback, but nothing substantive.
Yeah, you all were in a pretty good place last time I saw it there. Okay. Seeing head nods. Okay, good. All right then. Well, here we are. I want to go back to this public hearing preparation. So this is taking place next Wednesday, and there are a couple things that we need to cover, and we need to talk about publicizing the public hearing in a minute. So don't let me forget that. The thing I wanted to talk about was the actual presentation itself, and here's where I'm going to need the support of the subcommittee chairs, I imagine, to sort of fill out some of the slides. And so essentially the way that the plan I have in mind, and tell me if you think we should have a different plan, is to sort of, understanding that many people are going to be tuning in for the first time, right? There's the folks that come to all the subcommittee hearings and even meetings like this, and then those folks that just sort of tune in for the very first time. So, my plan is to start from the beginning. Here's this task force. Here's how it was created. Here's our charge. Here are the members. Here are the great staff that have supported us along the way. And to talk about, some of the framing that we've been, sort of operating under, the idea that, community gets to decide its approach to public safety, and how police, if at all, should be part of that approach. Understanding that that while a great many people think things are going just fine, there are another great many people in the community and in neighboring communities for which our model of public safety is simply not working for them. The idea that police need to be held to the highest standards and that we need clear accountability measures for what happens when officers fail to live up to those standards, which I hope everybody would agree with. And that this moment is an opportunity to rethink our relationship with police, but also to reconsider how we invest in the long-term well-being of our residents. So it's not just about police this work. What I'd like to do from there is to get into the survey. So Eitan, I know early on you presented some slides, relative to your analysis of the survey data. And so what I'd like to do then is sort of turn it over to you and say, to begin with, want folks to understand Brookliners' attitudes and orientation, to policing, as best as we can understand it through this sort of large community-wide survey that we did. Do you feel you'll be ready to do that again with the updated data and anything else that's sort of come out since then?
Yeah, I mean, I probably shouldn't. How much time do you want to spend on that?
I think if 10 minutes, even more time if you need it. I think it's an important element that really helps folks understand, where the community is on this. So,
yeah, that's fine. So, I mean, I spoke for much longer when I presented to this group. So I think that just kind of saying what we did, how we did it, and some of the top line findings, that's, yeah, 10, 15 minutes for sure.
If you need 15, you can have it.
Yeah.
If you need 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'll try to be efficient with it. I mean, I think that it's worth, I think what the survey can do is it help frame the rest of the discussion, because I think it points out clear areas where the public believes there's a problem, particularly with racial discrimination, and clear areas where the public is quite unified in solutions. So I think that focusing on the perceptions of discrimination and the overwhelming support for solutions, I think is probably useful, and I can do that in a fairly efficient way.
Okay, great. Good. And so you all know, we're preparing a Google Slides presentation, which should allow you to update. So I know that, I think the most seamless way to do this presentation is to use one slideshow, not to go back between a few. So Eitan, is there any problem sort of, I don't know, incorporating the slides that you have into this presentation?
Can I just send you PDFs? How does that work?
I don't think so.
I don't know. I I use LaTeX. I use like a weird academic program for making everything. So I don't know how to use like PowerPoint or anything. But I could.
Yeah, if you. Yeah, maybe. Devin, any insights here, or we can talk offline?
Yeah, Eitan, why don't you send me what you have, and then we can take a look.
Okay, I mean, the easiest thing for me is just to send you things that are in the same format of the slides I previously presented, which is basically like a PDF. So if I did that, without any kind of introductory pages, that maybe you could insert it, but I don't know if that wouldn't work in the program.
We'll give it a try.
Okay.
Thank you. From there, we're going to go into subcommittees. I'd like community engagement to go up first for obvious reasons. It sort of, I think, sets the stage, talks about, of course, some of the challenges, but also, the model and approach to community engagement that we settled on that I think could be a model for others going forward too. So I think that'd be helpful. What for each of the subcommittees, we have slides sort of set aside that that essentially a slide for the members of the subcommittee, a slide for any background information you want to share. And by the way, this could be more than one slide, but sort of points that we want to cover, a slide about process, anything you want to share about the process that you all went through, key findings, and also recommendations. So for instance, difference between a key finding and a recommendation. A key finding might be, hey, there was no MOU, or no data has been kept here, or there's been no analysis that's taking place over these many years. A recommendation would be different if the recommendations are what are in your subcommittee reports right now around recommendations, right? And that's just a guide. You could, do whatever else you need to do with that. Devin, remind me where we settled on how much time for each subcommittee.
Ideally 5 minutes per subcommittee.
Keeping in mind between sort of intro, the survey report, the subcommittee reports, would love to get this, we're probably looking at a presentation that's not quite an hour, hopefully. So, we want people to stay engaged, to get the information, which is a lot of information, but also to be ready to engage at the end of that process too. So we don't want to go too long.
Additionally, a recommendation that I have, is that something that I found was kind of consistent across the subcommittee public hearings was people asking where they could go for more information. Where do I find what you've already done and stuff like that? So it's maybe good if you do a bird's eye view in your presentation, but point them to the places to go. And I can be providing those links in the chat as well.
That's great. So after community engagement, we would go to, I'll just talk a little bit about program analysis, and then, those sort of things that we've been talking about, like, is this program necessary? Does it fit within the scope of police duties? Do the benefits outweigh the cost, especially for communities of color? Could these resources be better spent elsewhere? Some of those questions, and I'm sure others that you all came up with in your own work around analysis. So from there, from after community engagement, we would do departmental analysis, then the school resource officer subcommittee, then the walk and talk unit subcommittee, and then vulnerable people and people in crisis.
I just ask, can we ask Chi-Chi, I mean, since I'm presenting on the survey and Chi-Chi in some ways has more ownership over the department analysis document, at least can we invite her to run the department analysis?
Yep, I think that totally makes sense if she's willing, yeah. And I hope she will be willing. Yep. And then sort of the presentation of the Brookline Forward proposal, and then some wrapping up after that, which hopefully won't take too long before we get to the public comment. So that is one of the things that I need, that we need to know today is who's going to be able to do exactly what Eitan just asked, is the person that's going to be responsible from the subcommittee for updating these slides. All the work should have already been done and is in your subcommittee reports. It really is just putting together some slides that reflect that work that's already been done. My hope is that would be the chairs. And I know at least one case there's co-chairs, but I just want to make sure that we're clear, because I think Devin's going to be following up with folks on this, but who's going to be doing what. So departmental analysis, we'll ask Chi-Chi if that's something that she can do. Oh, sorry, community engagement was first. Community engagement, is there someone's going to take the lead on that?
I'll take responsibility for distilling our content into slides, and I'll just work with the team just to make sure that in those 5 minutes we can get the most critical content put forth.
Fantastic, great. So that's Kristen. Departmental analysis, we'll ask Chi-Chi. SRO? We'll come back to you. Walk and talk?
Yeah, I was going to say for SRO, I'm on that one as well. And so I can, if I'm going to be in there, I can do some work on that too, just as long as my subcommittee colleagues, if you all can do a second pass just to make sure things are distilled effectively.
I will say that's fine. I will say I think more voices at the public hearing is better. And to see more members of the task force presenting, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, I thought you were asking right now though about getting the slides organized, so it may be
right.
That,
sorry. All right. So let me be more clear. I imagine the person that's doing the slides is also one that's presenting them since they're putting them together. So you know what I'm really asking for is who's going to be making this presentation. Kristen, are you still comfortable making the presentation relative to community engagement?
I mean, I guess I don't mind either. And Kristen and I actually serve on both committees we're talking about. Right. Well, we serve on the same two committees, I guess, not both committees. I don't mind presenting in either one.
Yeah, I feel like we could hold space on some of the SRO stuff, Malcolm, but the youth-centered vision for community engagement, I feel like that is what most resonated with the public. And so I feel like if we're going to call you up, I would love to see you come forward on the community engagement part.
Yeah, wherever.
I think in the community engagement part, something that is interesting, I don't know where it should land, is that excuse me, that plan connects with a lot of the other subcommittee work. So finding a way for us all to kind of bring ourselves together, like the cahoots situation very much fits into that community engagement plan, the idea for the central website with all of our resources. Moving away from the walk and talk program is going to require that social services department and that community engagement. So as we're doing this, I don't know if Raul at the end, that makes sense to tie us all together using the social services and the community engagement as the column that kind of runs through all of us, or I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do the presentation. If you, Malcolm and Kristen, you want to focus in on the other subcommittee,
That would be
unless
great.
Kimberly wants to.
Kimberly says no. All right, so I've got then, I think Malcolm for community engagement, and Kristen's gonna be working on that with you, and Alexander for the school resource officer presentation. Walk and talk.
I'm fine doing that and gathering co-subcommittee members to jump in if it makes sense, but I'm happy to lead.
Great. Vulnerable people and people in crisis.
We talked about this yesterday at our meeting, and I'm going to be doing the presentation. We already started putting our slides together yesterday. We'll probably refine that a bit more, but yeah. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for doing that. I'll talk about the Brookline Forward piece and then wrap things up. Great. This is going to be, and I know some of the subcommittee public hearings had a sort of, depending on the number of people and how much comment there was, different approaches to this. Devino will help us manage the public comment piece with the expectation that there may be a great many people showing up. We're going to, of course, prioritize hearing from members of the public. In some of the smaller subcommittee hearings that we had, there was more of an opportunity for a back and forth and an engagement, more of a conversation. But what we don't want to do is crowd out people who have something to say by us spending a whole lot of time sort of responding to things, or there may be some times where there's something that we need to clarify, especially if it's just really wrong information or something like that. We'll want to do that, but in those cases we should do it very quickly and again get back to the purpose, which is to hear from people and their response to our work. So we'll Devin's been very effective in managing that for the select board and other groups as well. So I feel good about that. Other questions here about the presentation? I want to talk about publicity in a second, but Eitan? Yeah. Oh, you're muted.
I guess it's a publicity question. So I can wait.
Any questions about the presentation first? Amas.
I was just wondering, because I know you said it might take close to an hour for the presentation, and then it's like starts at 7. So, it's just like, okay, how much time is the public going to have? So I'm just thinking it's like 1 hour might not even be enough for the public, but that's just what I was thinking. So.
Right. The hearing starts at 7. However, depending, I'll be there till 1 a.m. if people have stuff they need to say. I'm mindful that you might not all be able to be there till 1, but I'm gonna sit there until every last person has said what they want to say. It's quite possible that it goes. It's quite probable that it'll go past 9. I think unlikely it would go past 10 just because most people would tap out by then. Yeah. Just be ready for you think it doesn't take that many people to get to a public comment to get to an hour, right? It just really doesn't, depending on how long we allow we provide for people to speak. So yeah, this should be fun, but I think this is like one of the most important things that we'll do in addition to all the other public hearings that we've had, because it's an opportunity for people to think about the whole rather than sort of individual parts of what we're doing. My hope is, I'm sure people will focus in on specific areas, but this will be our first opportunity certainly to present to the public a more holistic vision about a sort of a different way forward than we've been sort of operating under for a while. So we'll see what folks think about that. Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, one more question. So I'm assuming is Devin going to be advancing the slides, or one person's going to man that, or how is that going to work?
Well, it'll certainly be one person. Devin and I will talk. I think I don't know if Devin has an idea. She just unmuted, but
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, we'll figure it out. But it'll be one of us. So you'll need to, if you're presenting, you'll need to let just say next slide or something like that. Yeah, that's a good question. All right, Eitan, your question.
Yeah, I just have kind of a rookie question here, which is I know there are some people from our communities who care a lot about our work and supporting what we're doing, but they haven't had time to participate actively. So my question is, if there's like one hearing to like notify communities of and say, show up if you're supportive or you have questions, is it this one or is it the one for the select board? This is my rookie question.
It's a tough question, my friend. Well, this one is taking place on February 17th. The one in front of the select board is a month later on March 16th. I think it'll be, and Devin, correct me if I got that wrong. I think I got that right. Is that right?
It is right.
My hope is that people would show up on the 17th to give us, any feedback, support, and encouragement if they think we're going in the right direction, criticism if they think we're going in the wrong direction, whatever it is. I'll get to that, Alexander. The 16th is a very different, I think, kind of meeting. So let me talk about the difference here. So we are going to be presenting to the select board on March 2nd, but there won't be a public hearing at that point. The plan is to have a public hearing on March 16th, and that's when members of the public can weigh in. And at that point, we would have presented this thing on the 17th, gotten feedback, incorporated whatever feedback we want to into the final version that then goes before the select board. My hope, again, is that we have 11 unified task force members in full-throated support of what we produce as our final report that goes to the select board. Assuming that's the case, then for March 16th, really, I think our goal at that point is to make sure that that people who are supportive of this direction, one that we have agreed that we believe in, show up and support those efforts. And so I think there are two different hearings. Right now, we're still, we've got a really good idea of where we want to go, but at this point, we want to hear more from the public. And we want more people to tell us, right direction, wrong direction, here's something to consider. And I'm mindful that even though we've talked to a ton of people already, there might be a voice or more, a few voices that shift our thinking in one way or another about what we're doing. So that's the 17th. So I think they're both important in different ways. And that's not a satisfying answer, Eitan, but.
That's helpful. I didn't quite understand the two select board meeting dynamic, so that's helpful.
Right. Yeah. So it looks like, I think if I remember that schedule right, it's the 2nd is the presentation just to the select board, hearing questions from the select board directly. The 16th is the public hearing. The select board may have more questions at that hearing too, but the public is prioritized at that point. And then the 30th, scheduled tentatively anyway, for potential select board vote on the report. Yes. If I'm getting any of that wrong, I'm sure somebody will correct me, but I think that's right. Okay. All right, go ahead.
One more. And when will a document be ready for us? When is the draft report ready in this timeline?
Yes. So the schedule moving forward is such. On the 17th, we have the public hearing. On the 19th, 2 days later, this meeting that we're in right now is when we'll discuss any feedback from the public hearing and any sort of thinking we have about it. We'll talk about it. We'll see if there's anything that we think we should be adding to the final report, or maybe changing to the final report. And then a week later, the 26th, I want to say, is the date of that. Yes, it is. Friday the 26th is when we will then officially adopt our final report that will be going to the select board. And that will be sent to the select board directly, after we've adopted that. So what's happening in the meantime? 17th, we do our public hearing. 19th, we have our discussion about it. At that point, if there are any last minute changes to your subcommittee reports, we need them done ASAP, so that Devin and I can prepare to put it all together in a final report. I'm going to have been working on an executive summary, which essentially really just pulls out the work from your subcommittee reports, highlights it, does some of the framing that we're going to do for the public hearing anyway, that just says, hey, here's what you're about to see, is the work of these people who have done, followed these processes, this data-informed approach that we talked about, and please enjoy, and here are recommendations, and then here are subcommittee reports. So that part's going to be added to it, but it shouldn't be anything particularly new, other than what we've already talked about in these meetings. You'll have an opportunity to see that in advance of the meeting on the 26th, to ask any questions, or to say, hey, I think we should include this or that. And then on the 26th, we need to adopt something. So if there still need to make any minor changes at that point, we may be able to do that, but obviously the preference would be that you send in those changes ahead of time, so we're not spending about half an hour trying to fix one sentence in that final report. Okay. That gets sent to the select board, that gets put in their packet over the weekend, our packet over the weekend, and then we make our presentation that following Tuesday. So we can talk again after the 17th. If anybody's not available for that, let me know. Or if there are best times for that, let me know. But I think we're going to have to repeat this performance on the 17th, on the 2nd, and on the 16th at a minimum. So please be ready for that. Okay. Good, Eitan?
And these are all 7 o'clock start times for the select board?
No. So we've got to figure out when that's going to get scheduled. I think, generally speaking, we don't do presentations like this too early, just because folks aren't always available. Usually select board meetings are starting at 6 p.m. lately, but there's a lot that happens at the beginning and all kinds of other public comment and things that happen early on. So I wouldn't expect, and I can certainly request that this start no earlier than 7 o'clock.
That'd be very helpful for the parents. Yeah.
I figured. Bernard, consider it requested. See you on there. And Devin, help us out. Okay, great. All right, so around publicity, I think when last we talked, and maybe this is, I don't know that this is, somebody tell me if this has happened, but we were going to sort of collectively figure out who we were doing outreach to invite to the public hearing. We certainly I'd love for it to be each subcommittee, your responsibility to invite the people that you spoke with along the way. So that includes just everyone that was that spoke at some point as a guest, as someone that was informed in the area that you were working on, to re-invite them to the public hearing. I think would be really appropriate. They don't have to say anything if they don't want to, but at least so they can see the work, and if they do feel inclined to speak, I think that would that makes sense for them to do that. And then I think really important to get out the information to any organizations that you're part of or aware of that you think should know about this, and to have them spread the word too, so that that folks know this is happening and are come prepared to comment. We had talked about doing a Google Doc. Devin, did we ever do that?
So I didn't actually start a Google Doc. I have like a shared document in the 219 folder for the OneDrive, which I'll reshare with everyone. And then we can populate, everyone can, even if you don't have a Gmail address, you can be popping in there and populating that document, and then it'll be all in one place.
Okay. You said 219?
217, sorry.
217, I see it, yeah. Got it. Okay, great. So we can put stuff in there. Okay, perfect. That's great. So I think that'll be helpful just to track. Also, so like all five, like, you know, like, so all 11 of us don't send a message to, I don't know who, you know, or to whatever group. So we're not bombarding them, but to sort of track your outreach there, I think would be helpful. I'll be doing a lot. I think it's really important that we let folks know about this. Devin, do we have like a sort of a basic, and I think maybe you and Bonnie were working on something that we can share. Can you all talk about that?
Yes. Just like the information graphic that went out about all the hearings, I think the same thing can very easily go out. I plan on getting that to you ASAP right after this meeting. Devin, if there's something that, if someone has a better idea or how that should be laid out, that might be different from that, please let me know. Happy to do it. And I went back and forth about whatever formal information that needs to be on there in one way or another.
Devin, anything to add there?
Nope. I think what Bonnie and I discussed is good. We will obviously share a draft with you, and then my dream is to, you know, sort of get it on my social media schedule to go out over the weekend and just make sure that folks are aware. I did post it on the website a week in advance, in addition to sending out Notify Me and our little town website listserv. So it should be on people's radar. And like I said to Raul earlier in the week, based on the amount of people who were looking for the draft report, saying, you know, why is there no packet attached with this notice that was sent out? I think you're probably going to have a high attendance. So what I put together last night is sort of like the rough draft of the final report, compiling all of your subcommittee reports, which obviously when we're ready for the final report after you take feedback from the hearing on the 17th, we'll get all of that in the same font and the same styles, and all of you will be able to look at that before it's ready for prime time.
Great. Okay, so we will get that to the task force as soon as possible, and then a reminder to use the OneDrive to track your outreach. Not every individual person you reach out to, but if there are organizations, I think is probably the most critical thing that you're reaching out to, so that we're aware. I think it would be helpful. Yeah. Okay. Great. Any other questions, comments, concerns at this point? I would just say for next Wednesday, we'll remind you about this. I think it'd be helpful to be on early, not show up except for those that are, especially for those that are presenting. Not to everybody else, that's fine. But for those that are presenting, maybe we could just get on a little bit early and make sure that we've got all our ducks in a row and that everything's, you know, working fine and stuff like that. But we'll just send a note out about that. But just something to keep in mind for your schedules, if you're able. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Oh, Bonnie.
I'm pretty sure we don't have anything in front of us, right, in the agenda right now, other than
no, there's not a new business or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay. I just had a thought while we're talking here, if I could loop us back to the social service department. Now, I realize we're not proposing the beginning of a nonprofit or something that would have a mission, but maybe proposing some kind of a mission, or at least framing it in that way, might make sense. As I would love to see an anti-racist perspective, with a list of values as to, I don't know, to guide the vision of that somehow. I don't know how you do that in the town, if that's even possible. But it seems if we put out the lens that we hope it will look through, then no one can be like, well, you didn't call it you didn't say anti-racism before that, or you didn't define anti-racism, or whatever those things are. I mean, because we assume that the town functions with those things, but that is not how the town functions. So just a thought.
Yeah, I certainly don't assume that, but some other folks might.
Mhm.
I hear you. Let me take another look at it. I think developing a mission for this at this point might take some. I think there is a mission, first of all. I'll say it might not be defined as such, and I think it certainly doesn't include the word anti-racist, and maybe that's something that needs to be changed here, or updated here. I'll have to take a look at that and think about that a little bit.
I mean, however, wherever that makes sense in our presentation, but I think we have, when I think about this, I think of, like I said before, it kind of all fits together in this triangular, here's all the work, here's how we all fit together with these columns of community engagement and the social service department. And our findings, as Kristen mentioned before, we've run into a lot of fear and a lot of hesitation to reach out for resources or for help, or even to just voice their opinion on things. So, I feel like that aspect falls under or gives us reason to frame this solution, not just as removing police, but why this, through the findings, how these things all fit together under these concepts that presently don't exist. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Or they're imagined to be implied, but they're clearly not. Just like assuming that the town has all of our best intentions in mind, but if they're not declared, we can't point to them and say, this program, this person that you hired does not have these perspectives that benefit everybody. Therefore, that is not a good hire. Or, maybe this is farther down the road, but I think of all of this as the presentation of the work that we've done. Yeah. However, I'm curious to hear how other people feel about that. Or maybe there's a strategy around the presentation of this that maybe I'm not thinking of, or I don't know. That's just my thought.
Yeah. I'd be happy to work. I mean, I need to work on something anyway for the final report that sort of introduces this, and maybe that's where this shows up. Would you be comfortable sort of sending me some ideas about things that you think should be included? All right, maybe that's the most efficient way to get it done.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll say, I met yesterday with the town's new community engagement coordinator, I think is her title, and Carolina San Miguel, and she's great. I've seen her present at a couple of other meetings before, which I think she's terrific. And one of the things that we were talking about, and she was asking about is where to focus, her energies, especially in the early days. And one of the things that I talked with her about was, understanding how her position got created in the first place. And it certainly wasn't created because wealthy white homeowners didn't have a voice in our politics. It was created because immigrants and folks who live in public housing and subsidized housing and other folks who've been long left out of our politics haven't been, and there was a recognition by petitioners and people that were fighting for some change to our budget to make that position happen, and then ultimately town meeting, a recognition by town meeting that was needed to better engage people who aren't as engaged. I think the same thing here. I think that this proposal comes at the end of what are a long series of well thought out arguments about the need for a change in direction. And that is evidenced by the subcommittee reports themselves. I think what I hear you and others saying is that we want to make sure that the connection is explicitly made between those works and those words and this proposal here. And so, I've got some work to do there. Is there something else I'm not hearing in addition to that? Because I do want when the commissioner for this agency is going through the application process and interviewing, I want that, the person who ultimately gets hired to understand why this position was created in the first place. And I think looking at this report is going to be critical for them to sort of think about, all right, how am I going to orient myself around this work?
I just want to also point out that Devin in the chat wrote that lots of departments are working on mission statements. So this would be right in line with the work that's going on. That's really great news and leaves room for us to really shape what that department could look like. It's scary for me to imagine the 5 minutes that each subcommittee has. I don't know, it's not scary, but it's a big challenge for us to get the all that we found and the real crux of the work presented in that amount of time. We will be able to do it, but that's really difficult. And I know this deeply from what we saw come out of the hearing in the Walk and Talk subcommittee hearing and the article that came out. It's just so simple for people to sit back, watch the presentation and say, they only talked to 3 people and they made this decision that they're going to wipe out a program. Like, that's so simple. And that's where people sit most of the time when they're taking in this work. Like, what is the surface? What's right on top? But, asking people to read the report and all the work that we did do and all the nuance and the history that folds into our reasoning is a lot to expect of people. So I think it's important for us to think about how we can tuck all that in every opportunity that we have in one way or another to make it really clear, because that to me is the whole argument. Like, it's, the history and expressed discomfort is subtle to most people that don't think about this. It doesn't seem enormous to anyone to hear that someone might feel uncomfortable looking out their window to see a police officer, or have this not understanding the accumulation of that feeling, in addition to the context of being a Black person, period, and the history therein. So what I'm going to work on between now and then is really hitting those things home, because we have this one opportunity to make sure that people hear us for real, and make sure, people who write about this stuff, have everything right in front of them without having to spend 3 hours with our report. Because we saw how with the not so great article that came out in the patch, that's enough to tank us. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure I'm actually saying anything, but I feel an urgency or I feel the weight of the work we have to do between now and Wednesday to be able to like really, really pull it together. You know, and my obsessive compulsive, you know, the obsessive preparer in me wants to have like a dress rehearsal so that we can all like hear ourselves and make sure that we're tying everything together correctly for the public. But that might not be realistic, but that, you know, I feel like this is a really, really big deal. And it's what we've all been working for 6 months. So I just, hope we all take it super seriously and think about making sure we communicate these things. No pressure though.
Well, one of the things that I hear in what you're saying is that, well, we know that some people are just not for it, right? And they won't be for it despite the best articulation of our arguments. They still won't be for it. But we should still put forward the best articulated arguments that we possibly can, and allow them to just decide that they know better, or that they just aren't for it. But that at a minimum, we should really, in the report, in our presentation, make sure that by the time we're done, we feel like, yeah, that was really well representative of the work that we've done over the time that we have and our thinking on this. Okay. Yeah. All right, let's talk about what it looks like to prepare, at least for the folks that are speaking, to prepare for this public hearing on the 16th. Let me think about that and get back to you all about that. Other thoughts here?
Well, I'm not a big proponent of this personally. It's not how I function, even though in some capacities I do. You know, for 5 minutes, it may be worthwhile to have a script for yourself. And that way, like, you're predetermining your words, you're following your words, particularly on a Zoom. You know, the camera's still on and you can have your thing up there and just read it and it looks like you're looking in the camera. And for some people, that's super helpful. And some of the, diversity work and training, I use scripts, even though as a teacher and doing, sometimes 100, I rarely use scripts. But I do think it's a way for some people to help them and to be settled, and to really have thoughtfulness around their words. And there is some equation that I just can't remember of, like, if you're doing a 5-minute thing, that means it's this many words. Like, I can't remember what that is. But there's some type of equation of like how many words per things. And particularly if you script it, you can rehearse it. And there's all kinds of old public speaking tricks. Read it into a mirror, all these other things that help people to calm themselves and slow themselves down. But I think, and I think the one thing I would just ask, so say I were to script something and then share it with my committee members for feedback, is that breaking open meeting law?
Well, we've got, I see you, Michael.
Yep. Can you repeat the question?
So Michael, it's a hypothetical that, like, say I'm scripting for my subcommittee to present on the 17th. And then I send that script to the subcommittee for potential feedback before I actually read it on the 17th. Is that breaking open meeting law?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I would say my initial thought is it would be. It's expressing your opinion and thoughts on the subject matter within your jurisdiction. You could possibly send it, well, I guess for this SRO, it's just 3 people, right? Or is it just a 3-person subcommittee?
It's 4 of us.
Oh, it's 4. You could
Yeah.
send it to one person and just ask for feedback.
Okay.
Circumvent the open meeting law restrictions. I know it's kind of like a
So to be
ridiculous-
technical, could I
yeah, it's
send
sort of a
it?
ridiculous,
Well,
response.
could I send it individually to each committee member, have
No,
them give
because
me
that's-
feedback, and not in their, like, you know what I mean? Like I know in public meeting law, I could perhaps meet with one of them, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Then you're getting into like a serial. What they
Yeah.
call it. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, let me bring Devin in, because we've done this as a board where someone has a proposal and then we have other board members provide feedback. How do we do that?
Yes, this is Devin. So my recommendation and what the select board does in these situations is, Malcolm, you would send your recommendation to me. I would then send it to the subcommittee, and then the subcommittee members individually would reply back to me. I would share that information with you.
Okay.
There you go. Thanks, Devin.
Happy to
There's the
help.
resolution.
Yeah, there's a scary open meeting law article from Danvers if you want to see how quickly the attorney general will turn on some of those things that I can share with you
Okay.
if you're interested
Okay.
in that type of reading.
Well, I just, I don't think any of us want to feel sort of the individual onus of just, like, we're presenting for a committee. And so, if I'm choosing to present and I script it, I want to make sure my words convey the committee's thoughts. And so, yeah, I just, and that sounds like a reasonable way to do it. You know what I mean? Like, again, I don't want to break open meeting law, but I also don't want to not have the feedback of my committee members. And so, this seems like the reasonable resolution.
I'd appreciate if you could include me on that as well. I may have feedback that I'd like to provide too. So when you send those to Devin, just copy me as well. Great. And I'm not on your subcommittee, so with the exception of departmental analysis, which is all set, I'm not on your subcommittee, so it shouldn't be a problem. And we can talk with Chi-Chi about something else. Okay. Good. I'll probably Devin might be in touch throughout the next few days about anything else we need to do to prepare for the 17th. But again, you've done the work already. What we're trying to do is distill a lot of work into a relatively short amount of time. But we will over and over and over again, and feel free to do this in your own remarks. As Devin said, refer people to the full report because there's so much richness, particularly in some of the historical information, in some of the discussion that you all had, and some of the meetings that you had with people that are captured in those reports that led to the recommendations that you have. And we're going to keep reminding people that that's there. It won't stop some people from just showing up and just having thoughts, but we're gonna do our part and keep reminding people about that. The other thing is I want to make sure that whenever we send out an invitation to the public hearing, that we also include a link to the report. That sort of that wonky draft report that Devin described earlier. So Devin, Bonnie, just make sure that when we get that graphic or whatever it is that you want us to share, that we also get a direct link to the information, and not just in the graphic, because sometimes these links are long and I don't know what someone's expected to do with that, but that we actually get the link that we can put into an email and share with somebody or put at the bottom of a Facebook post or whatever it is. That'd be really helpful so that we can keep directing people to read the report. Good. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Great work, everybody. So I usually say I'll see you next week, and I will, but on Wednesday as well as Friday of next week. So I will see you all 7 p.m. Wednesday evening for a public hearing, if not sooner, and certainly again next week at this time. All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the weekend.